And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another weekly review with The Robot, brought to you by the Movie Pope. And here he is, bolts and nuts akimbo, The Robot.
When Across 110th AD was released in 1972, it was one of many gritty crime dramas to grace the big screens across America. It was a product of its time, and yet there are elements that are familiar in 2025 as they were in 1972. Today I want to explore what would it be like if this film was adapted into a series. I've got a few ideas floating around here, but feel free to let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are. The 1970s has a reputation for being gritty, dark, and pessimistic, the antithesis of the optimism of its predecessor. While cop dramas of the past always had this edge to them, the ones made in the 1970s were especially caustic in nature. Cops were more inclined to behave in ways that were a shock to their forebears and their descendants. So, how can it made today? And more importantly, should it be made? Well, to answer the first question, we need to look at what has happened in America since 2021. Police have been on the receiving end of public scrutiny, abuse, and inquiry following the George Floyd incident. And since then, campaigns like defund the police and exercising looser restrictions on convictions have led to a spike in criminality, particularly in places like LA and New York. Crime has become so prevalent that it's led to some businesses closing shop due to lack of response from the police, who are themselves hamstrung by political and budgetary oversight. Add on the migrant crisis we've seen over the past 2 to 3 years and the stress it's placed on municipal infrastructures, and you've got a problem of major proportions. So, if Across 110th ST were to be greenlit, it would be a bold move to say the least. So, how can it be made? It would touch on themes of the today as aforementioned and show just how the police realistically respond to these matters and address how political intervention hampers, not help, efforts to enforce the law. Especially in big cities like NYC, it would need to touch on the social divide on numerous levels: race, economic status, citizenship, etc. And it would need to explore the dark underbelly of the migrant and criminal situations. But that's a fault of 1970s cop drama. They thrived on the dark underbelly of society just to emphasize how bad things have gotten. It would also need to be careful in how the police behave. Obviously, they're not going to break skulls or torture anybody, but they would still need to show some chutzpah in order to get across to the criminals they're apprehending that they mean business. And there would need to be major conflict between them and the city bigwigs who are living in ivory towers, a sort of idealism versus reality kind of scenario. Should it be made, given the public discontent with these lax laws and the subsequent crime waves? There really isn't anything on TV right now that is addressing the matter head-on. By taking a movie like Across 110th Street and adapting it to modern times to address the concerns of the public, it may well have some impact, but that is to be determined. But it would portray the police in a way that we can see the struggles they face when dealing with crime and how legislation hinders their efforts. In the original, our leads were played by Anthony Quinn and Yaphet Kotto. For the modern version, you would want to leads who carry the gravitas of being authority figures but aren't afraid to intimidate when needed. I think David Harbour has the chops to play Frank Martelli, and John David Washington would play William Pope, thereby playing off the old cop-young cop dynamic. Obviously, you want to show the clash in policing methods. Harbour brings a more gruff approach to the field, while Washington's more straight-laced and by the book. And as for the theme song, keep the Bobby Womack version. I've heard modern artists saying they suck. They'll take something good and just ruin it. Nothing beats the original. Plus, it's a good way to tie the new series with its 1970 predecessor. After all, it was good enough for Jackie Brown. While the 1970 version was more focused on the mafia and black gangs, the new one should focus on gangs entering New York as migrants and explore how they're exploiting the safety net created by the state. It should also examine the spike in shoplifting gangs and how they're creating an underground economy, reselling stolen items online or even to major vendors, some of whom we won't name, and possibly how and why policymakers are turning a blind eye to it. No doubt it will rattle a few cages, but I think it's something that needs to be said, and if the government isn't gonna shine a light on it, then pop culture should take over. What would kick off the series could be 3 new recruits to a migrant gang interrupting business ran by a local gang, leading to conflict and vendetta. The police are trying their best to handle the matter, but with City Hall getting in the way, it's not much luck, and Martelli and Pope resolve to carry out the task of bringing the perps to justice, although there would be conflict over how they accomplish said goal. Obviously, there are elements of the movie that shouldn't be replicated, but it would still be a good piece for highlighting the current situation we're seeing in New York City and how they are ought to be addressed. That would be a radical show, and it would take one hell of a producer to get it done. Thanks for watching, and if you don't mind, please leave us a like. It helps a lot. And while you're at it, subscribe so you never miss an episode drop. This is the Robot signing off.